So what's going on, guys? DIY Dan here again, and this is another episode of Day to Day Around the House. In this video, I actually picked up this metal hose reel for $5 from a gentleman selling it at a garage sale. I figured there was something wrong with it, but usually it is the swivel, and usually it is just a couple O-rings that have gone bad. That's exactly what it turned out to be, and I'm going to show you how to fix it. This repair took me less than 20 minutes to do and cost me less than $5 in O-rings. And let's get to it. So even if your garden hose reel doesn't look identical to the one that I'm repairing in this video, the overall concept that I go over in this video is going to be the same for most swivels on garden hose reels, even some air hose reels, fuel hose reels, etc. However, this video is not intended for hose reels that have a spring-loaded return unless the swivel for that hose reel is completely external and threaded into the exterior of that hose reel. Now, the reason I took the time to buy this hose reel for $5 is because these metal garden hose reels can run upwards of $100, making it well worth my time in order to fix this. If you have one of the plastic hose reels, I've never disassembled one of those, so I don't know whether those are going to follow the same concept as far as the swivel goes. Usually the cheaper the product goes, the more disposable the parts are, and you do end up having to replace instead of possibly repair the problem that you're having. The other option is there is universal garden swivels on Amazon that you can buy for a pretty reasonable price, so you might be able to go that route as well. So here's a little better look at the leak that I had on this garden hose reel. You'll notice that the leak is coming from that swivel and not from the garden hose itself. There is one special tool you will need in order to fix the swivels on most hose reels, and that is a pair of snap ring pliers. You will need this tool to remove the snap ring on the end of the swivel in order to disassemble it. This is the most common type of retaining ring that you're going to find on these swivels. There are some other styles that I'll go over at the end of this video in case for whatever reason your garden hose reel is using a different type of retaining clip. In order to remove the snap ring, all you have to do is stick the ends of the snap ring pliers in the holes in the snap ring and then squeeze the handle of the pliers in order to spread that snap ring open and remove it from the groove that it's sitting in the swivel. Now, depending on how old this hose reel swivel is, these snap rings can get stuck and kind of rusted in there, so you might want to squirt them down with some type of a penetrating oil and let them soak for 5 to 10 minutes before attempting to remove it. It might also help to rotate the swivel while you're trying to squeeze the pliers in order to help break that snap ring loose from the groove that it's in the shaft of the swivel. Once you remove the snap ring, you should be able to rotate the outer part of the swivel off of the inner shaft. At this point, I decided to remove the garden hose from the swivel to make it easier to work on. Before going any further, you want to take a good look at the inside of the outer housing of the swivel and the shaft itself to make sure there's no corrosion or pitting that might prevent the new O-rings from making a good seal. Both mine looked pretty good, so I was pretty confident that new O-rings was going to fix the leak. If that outer housing is pitted or corroded where the O-ring seals to it, you will not be able to fix the swivel and either need to think of replacing it or scrapping the hose reel. If it's not pitted or corroded and everything looks okay as far as the shaft and the outer housing, then it is time to remove those O-rings so you can get them matched up. Now, because this was a high quality hose reel, there was a total of 4 O-rings that sealed this swivel up. If it's a little bit on the cheaper side, there might only be 1 on each side instead of 2. I just like to use a pick with a 90-degree angle on it in order to get under the O-ring, lift it up and off of the groove that it is on the shaft. I did this for all 4 O-rings. If you don't have any picks, a small flathead screwdriver will work to do the job as well. Once removing those O-rings, you should be able to go to any hardware store and they should have a decent enough selection that you should be able to match these up. If you're not having any luck with your basic hardware store trying to find those O-rings, you can try any automotive store like Napa or O'Reilly. If those let you down, any hydraulic hose repair facility should have a wide variety of O-rings that should help you out. I did do a quick search on Amazon, and if you do have a Liberty Garden 4000 hose reel, which is what I think I have, they do sell the kit on Amazon in order to repair it. If you end up going somewhere where you need to match up the O-rings yourself, you just want to put them side by side, make sure they look like they're the same diameter, make sure the inside diameter is the same and the outside diameter is the same. In all actuality, the outside diameter should be a little bit bigger because the old O-ring should be flattened out a little bit compared to the new one. When you're matching up the size O-ring that this one is, I find that putting them on my finger really helps make sure the inside diameter feels the same, and you can line them up right next to each other and make sure everything looks identical. Making sure these O-rings are identical is extremely important. If you end up going with too small of an O-ring, then it's obviously going to leak. If you end up going with too big of an O-ring, then there's a good chance you're going to rip that O-ring as you install the outer housing onto the shaft, causing a leak that way. Once you've got your new O-rings, just start by sliding it into the groove on the one side and then push it up over the rest of the shaft. Now the problem with doing this is it does twist the O-ring as it goes into place. You need to remove that twist. All you need to do in order to do that is grab that flathead screwdriver or that 90-degree pick, get it underneath the O-ring, and then rotate it around the shaft a couple times, and that will remove any twist out of that O-ring that happened to it while you were installing it. If you don't take the twists out of the O-ring, they might not seal right, and you're going to waste your time of trying to do this repair. When installing these O-rings, I like to start with the one closest to the outside of the shaft. That way, when I put the second one on, it's not getting stuck in the groove of the first one. It's just rolling over the top of the O-ring that's already in place, and I continue that for all 4 O-rings. So right here, I'm just using some Scotch-Brite sanding pads in order to clean and deburr anything that might be on the inside diameter of that outer housing for the swivel, so that as I install the outer housing over the shaft, there's nothing that might damage the new O-rings and cause a leak. Doing that by hand got really annoying, so I ended up putting one of my sanding drums on my drill, then put the Scotch-Brite inside and use the drill to finish polishing that out. So right here, I've got some swimming pool O-ring lubricant. I put this on all the O-rings before going to install the outer housing of the swivel. This will help that outer housing slide right over those O-rings without possibly ripping or tearing those O-rings. I also like to use this lubricant on any garden hose bibs that I'm planning on leaving that hose on for a while. If any of you have had a garden hose be an absolute pain in the ass to try and get unthreaded off a hose bib, and you possibly damage or ruin that garden hose end when trying to do it, this lubricant will drastically help that not happen to you in the future. I also put a little bit of the lubricant inside the outer housing to help it slide into place a little nicer as well. And since I was there, I decided to go ahead and use a pick to remove the old hose bib seal and install a new one. When installing the outer part of the swivel housing, you want to put light tension on it and twist as you push to help guide the outer housing over the O-rings. When putting the outer housing over the shaft, you should feel the resistance of the O-ring. If you don't feel that resistance, then your O-ring is probably too small. If you're having a really hard time pushing the outer housing over the shaft, then your O-rings might be too big. And watch as soon as you go over the first O-ring to see if there's any of that black material from the O-ring on the shaft once you get it over that O-ring to see if it possibly ripped it. Because if that's the case, you need to remove that swivel again, replace that O-ring with one that's a little smaller in diameter. Then grab your snap ring, spread it open, put it over the shaft until it lines up with the recessed groove in the shaft. Then let tension off of the pliers and that snap ring should pop right into place. If for whatever reason you're having a hard time getting that snap ring all the way into the groove, once you've got it started, you could take a flathead screwdriver and a rubber mallet and just tap that snap ring to push it the rest of the way into the groove. I did put some of that magic lube on the threads of this garden hose before installing it, even though I didn't get a video of it. Real quick, I'm going to go over the other type of retaining rings that might come on one of these garden hose swivels, even though they're not nearly as popular. If your retaining ring looks like this is an E-clip style. The cool thing about these is it doesn't require any special tools. You're just going to take a flathead screwdriver, get it underneath one of those recessed areas and pry it off. The next 2 styles of retaining rings I'm going to show you are more common in the mechanical industry, but there is a possibility they could be on there. This style of ring takes a spanner wrench in order to spread it apart in order to remove it. The last type of ring, the easiest way to think about this is the kid's toy slinky. It has several thin layers of steel. All you do is find the end with a small pick or screwdriver and spiral it off of the shaft. If your swivel also has a white plastic ring next to the O-ring, just take a picture of the location of those and just leave those where they're at. You can replace them if absolutely necessary. Those are called backup rings, and they're more commonly found on higher pressure applications than a garden hose reel. If you do need to get them because they're damaged, your best bet is a hydraulic hose repair facility. The tires were bad on this thing as well, but I wasn't planning on moving it, so I just ended up removing those tires and wheels off of there. If I decide I want some in the future, I'll just be buying some flat free ones to throw on it. Here is the end result of this project, guys. You'll notice the hose start to move from me turning on the water pressure, and then I'm turning on the nozzle here, so you can see I do have that water pressure, and there's no leak coming from the swivel on that hose reel. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and it gave you some good information. If so, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. The whole concept of my channel is to give you guys the most information in the least amount of time as possible, so I don't waste your time. And I hope to see you next time. Have a good one. Later.